Hi, I'm Andy Acton.
And I'm Chris Strevens.
This is Dentology, the Business of Dentistry podcast. So we're back for one of our special episodes, just me and you again.
Just you and me.
Exactly. So I like these because it gives us the opportunity to talk about some of the things that people ask us about.
Yeah, and are topical.
Yeah.
24 years we've done this.
Yeah.
What's it? We've been going 36 years, something like that as a business. And I bet you these questions have come up. I definitely know they've come up in our 24 years.
Yeah.
They are consistent because they are just questions that relate to selling a dental practice.
And that's the thing, isn't it? So, this podcast is the business of dentistry. And whilst business isn't just about owning a dental practice and buying a practice and selling a practice, there's many different facets to it. For many, they will be practice owners who someday will be selling, whether it's on their terms, on somebody else's terms, they will be selling someday. So I think today it would be quite useful just to run through what we see as being kind of the top tips and the key things that you should do to prepare yourself to sell, and also make sure that you have a good exit as well, because that's what we want for everybody.
Yeah, everybody, yeah. As less stress as you can make it.
Yeah. And I think that thing about whether it's on your terms or not, I think for me, when you get to that stage where you're thinking about selling a dental practice, and bearing in mind that big life decisions quite often take 3 to 5 years. It sounds remarkable, but people that thing about having a family, getting married, moving house, buying a business, selling a business. It's amazing how long we let these things we mull over before we actually take a decision. But I think when it comes to selling your dental practice, I think you need to really understand why you're selling. And, Simon Sinek kind of coined that phrase, know your why. But this is know your why in the sense of why is it you're selling? What are you going to do the other side? Because as a species, with good medical science and better diet and everything else, we're living longer, which is amazing. Over our period of ownership of Frank Taylor Associates, we've seen the average age of people selling drop from early mid-60s to late 40s, early 50s.
Definitely.
So many people could be having a 30 or 40 year period beyond selling their dental practice. So I'd encourage people to own a practice to really understand what they would like the other side to look like. Because if they sell, it's going to happen. So they need a plan of some sort as to what they're going to do.
And also during the transaction to keep remembering it.
Yes.
Because sometimes people sort of forget it, don't they? They get grumpy about things. And it's like, this is, I think sometimes, I don't know whether it is or whether it isn't. And dentists listening, please don't shoot me. But is it because dentists quite often are the masters in their own practices? So therefore, when someone, and that can either be a broker or the buyer or the buyer's valuer, the buyer's solicitor, or even their own solicitor, when they're challenged, and probably not even the word challenged, probably asked questions of, they sometimes get a bit grumpy about it, because it's like, how dare you ask me that question? And the answer is they're not doing it out of any other reason apart from just asking a question.
Just need the information.
I do wonder if I find it sometimes that and then people get disgruntled, and then they forget the why.
Yes.
You're selling this because of.
And I think refocusing on that is important. And I think once you've worked it out, the start point has to be getting a valuation, because it is going to be a commercial transaction. So you do need to understand, and you need an independent valuation. You need somebody who's going to, being blunt, tell you the truth.
Yeah, not a vanity value.
It's what could genuinely be achieved in the open market. And I'd also encourage people to not let the buyer value their practice, because if we see, I know it sounds bizarre, and people will be like, well, why would you ever do that? But you'd be amazed at how many people that own dental practices who are approached by a prospective purchaser who tells them what they believe the practice to be worth, and that then sets the tone for the conversation about what the practice is worth. Arguably, somebody who is looking to buy the asset may not be particularly generous in their assessment of it, because for good reason they want to acquire it for the lowest price possible. So getting an independent valuation is so important.
Or making it joint.
Yes.
So
Good point.
I think it's so true. You wouldn't. I always think to myself, it amazes me. If someone knocked at your door where you live and said, "I'll offer you X for your house," would you sell it? And the answer is no. What would happen is you go and talk to 3 estate agents or one estate agent as a minimum to find out. But so many people, well, maybe so many people don't, but there are a number of people who will take it as read that, guess what, the person who wants to buy it, well, we had that one. Do you remember that one where it was like the associate had said to the principal that he didn't want it valued by us. I remember, I can be specific about us. And it was because he'd offered £700,000 less than the value. Now, obviously, it's that classic thing when someone says, "Don't get Frank Taylor's to value it." Obviously, when it got us to value it, but we then sold it for the value. But the relationship between the associate and the principal was destroyed.
Yeah,
because basically, ultimately, the associate was trying to do him over.
Oh yeah, no, which isn't good. And then I think once you've got your value and you've made that commitment that you are going to sell, I think it then comes down to how do you do that? Do you do that yourself, or do you engage an agent? And obviously we're agents, we're brokers, so there would be a bias in here. And I think people can sell the practice themselves, they can do it. I think the only thing you need to appreciate is the time you need to allocate in doing it. People can self-sell, people can do it themselves. They don't need a broker. There's no legal requirement. There's no reason that you need it other than they will make your life easier. The transaction will be quicker. A good broker should more than cover their fee in their value-added service. But also, as a dental practice owner, you're a dentist who knows how to run a business. If you've never brokered a deal or acted in a business sale before, do you want to be learning on your prized asset?
With the amount of time
Probably
and the
not.
complexity.
Yeah.
What information do you give? How much do I give? When should I give it? I'm just thinking, as we were talking, it makes me think, do you remember, and I don't know on our listeners, but there was Purple Bricks. Do you remember Purple Bricks?
Yeah.
Came into the market, they were going to disrupt the fact by not having a estate agent, you're going to do it yourself. I think they've gone out of business or someone's bought them because ultimately people realised, and selling houses is a darn sight easier than selling a dental practice, that actually you needed someone there to look after and watch your back and manage the process, manage your buyers, make sure the view, all that sort of stuff. Because one thing I can't think I've ever heard from dentists, and, I suppose being an old git, 40 years worth of talking to dentists, I don't seem to remember many dentists saying to me, "Oh yeah, I've got loads of time." One thing that they are very short of is time.
Well, we did that very quick analysis on a few deals, and we worked out it's somewhere around about 200 hours get spent on managing a deal from it being listed to the market to take it through to completion. It's about 200 hours. So that time needs to be found somewhere.
Yeah.
And like you say, this is a profession who we know are time poor. So you need to take your time away from either your surgery, your business, your family, your hobbies, whatever it might be. That time has to come from somewhere. And
it's not like it's 2 hours a day, though, is it? It's not like it's 100 days of 2 hours.
No.
There'll be some days that it's intense.
And also, you never know when it's going to go wonky.
No.
Yeah, it's a bit like that thing that I'd back myself to fly an aeroplane. If nothing went wrong and I just had to hold on to the steering wheel and just keep it in the lane, I'd probably be okay. But if something went wrong, I wouldn't have a clue what to do. And that's the bit where it starts to unravel. Yes, that's the bit that's important. And then I think if you then do it yourself, you alluded to this point about what information do you give out? When do you give the information out? How do you keep it confidential? And again, ideally you want to go to what we refer to as the open market. Yeah. The open market is a broad approach to canvass as much interest for that practice as possible. But you do have the confidentiality issue. I remember many years ago, probably going back a couple of decades, there was a practice owner in southwest London who decided to list his dental practice himself for sale. So he created a brand new email address, put an advert in the BDJ,
which was the
way to sell
classifieds.
A dental practice many years ago. He went into his surgery in the morning, came out at lunchtime to have a message saying that his inbox was full, and he assumed it was a problem, and it wasn't. He had 200 people send him inquiries about his dental practice. So now you've got 200 people to filter through. And going back to your point, what information do you give them? Because it's sensitive, confidential financial data. How do you find out if these people are genuine or they're just fishing?
Are they good for the money or just like tie kicking?
So on the one hand, you want to go to the open market to get the best price, but on the other hand, you've got to preserve it. So, okay, arguably people could be sitting there saying, this just sounds like an advert, you're trying to push people towards a broker. We're not. And by all means, choose whoever you want to go with. The point is that if you're going to self-manage it, do not underestimate the time you need to allocate to do that. And if you are able to do that and you can create the time and you're not perhaps active in your business, then it can be done. But just go into it with your eyes open in terms of the commitment you'd need to give.
I suppose I could pull my own teeth out if I had to, but I tell you what, it'd be much better going to a specialist. Servicing my car. I could probably service my car. It might take me quite a while and I might well cock up some bits, but I could probably do it. But I tell you what, it'd be so much cheaper and so much more efficient to take it someone who knows what they're doing.
Exactly right. Let's jump into a specific as well as when it comes to selling a practice as well, because every practice is going to operate from either the freehold or leasehold. Freehold, you own the building outright, you have the deeds. Leasehold, somebody else owns the building, you have the right to be there for a period of time that's captured in a lease document. Where somebody owns a freehold is pretty straightforward, because they have the rights to sell the property and that property gets sold with the dental practice.
Yep.
What are the complexities that come with it as a leasehold? This week's episode is brought to you in partnership with Ultimate Dental Business. We know as guys who have supported dentists for over 25 years and through hosting this podcast that building business skills in dentistry is vital. Time and again, we hear from dentists who tell us that they find the business side of dentistry the most challenging. And we know that stress and pressure comes from doing things we don't feel well equipped to do. That is why we are delighted to be part of Ultimate Dental Business, the new dental business hub delivering top-tier business training for dentists. Founded by Dr. Brad Thornton and Dr. Krupal Shah, Ultimate Dental Business is a response to the lack of robust dental business education currently available. Through our effective collective discussions with dentists, it was clear they most needed good structure and effective guidance to give them the knowledge and tools to be successful dental business owners and to create a business that serves them rather than the business that takes all their time and energy to keep going. To find out more about developing your own business education, click on the link in the show notes or go to ultimatedentalbusiness.com.
Most of them, to be honest, it's not as complicated as people perceive. I think the risks, basically you've got to look at, most leases are written within what's called the Landlord and Tenant Act 1954, which gives an automatic right of renewal at expiry. There are certain exclusions, things like if you want it back for own use or development, isn't it? But you can't just say it, you have to prove it and go to court on it. I think the real thing for a lease is probably the term.
Yeah.
Making sure that the term of the lease is long enough, ideally minimum 10 years. And that's really only around the banks. The banks like to lend, if you want to buy a practice that's got a 5-year lease on it, the bank will lend you money. But the problem is they'll only lend it to you over 5 years. So your repayments are massive. Most leases can be assigned, can't they? There's occasions when the landlord... because most leases say they can't be reasonably withheld. Some landlords are a bit gitty about it. And I suppose the word of caution here is, if you are considering selling, look at the term of your lease and maybe take this opportunity to renegotiate a new lease rather than trying to renegotiate it when the sale is now conditional upon it. Because... that's that guy. Do you remember the guy with the was it the cruise? Do you remember he told his landlord, didn't he, or
That
something,
he was
that he was selling and going on a cruise, and it was in the thousands, wasn't it?
It was yeah. I mean, the landlord
How much
basically
did the landlord charge?
it was tens of thousands.
Yes.
And basically it was almost unless you pay me tens of thousands, I'm not going to play ball and do this quickly.
50 grand, wasn't it? I think, and he only sold it for 300,000 or something. And he spent 50,000 to sell it for 300 because he told the landlord. Because one of the other things I suppose we always say to our valuers is everybody says their landlord's a really great person, but you find sometimes if a landlord gets a little snifter, there might be an opportunity to levy an extra fee to extend your lease.
I think we find in transactions, third-party landlords on the leasehold side of things is a recurring issue in delaying deals. So your point about speak to the landlord early, get your lease in good shape.
Because the thing is, though, don't you? The risk, isn't it? If you start doing it during the process, you end up. The closer you become to completion, the danger is the lease is then the only thing that's hanging around.
Yeah.
So the risk is that, one, you're putting yourself under huge stress to get it done, and nobody likes stress, but also at risk of cost.
Yes.
Because the danger is you will then almost acquiesce to paying 20 grand to get the lease sorted, which actually probably if you made it done it 18 months ago, you wouldn't have had to pay anything, or you know, a couple of grand or something. So definitely.
And I think on a more general point about preparing yourself for sale, I think the more you can do in advance of looking to find a buyer, the better. Because I think the gold standard, we had a client once who came to us with a memory stick and they said, there you go. And on the memory stick were their financial accounts, their management information, their employment contracts, their lease, their NHS contract, their service contracts for their compressors and suction motors, their telephone contract, their alarm contract, everything that would form the basis of a due diligence bundle was on this memory stick. That knocked between 10 to 12 weeks off the transaction time because typically lawyers are constantly asking for this information. This seller had done that in the months prior to putting their practice on the market. They had a very, very smooth transaction. Most people wait until they've got an offer accepted and then start scrabbling around trying to find the paperwork. And that's where you lose the momentum and it gets frustrating. And as you said earlier, you know, one thing that we've never heard is a dentist saying, I've just got so much time every week. I've got hours. I'm trying to find something to do. People are busy.
I think also people don't realise, the sellers don't realise that change. We are creatures of habit, aren't we? So when you've got a dentist who's run a practice for 20 years, 15 years, whatever that number is, and they then decide to sell, and then they start asking the practice manager or the team, do you know where the so-and-so is, or where this is, and where's the impressor thing? Now, you should know where it is because of CQC, but the likelihood is you probably don't know where it is, but someone else might know where it is. Those team members will know that something's awry because you've never asked that question in 20 years. So suddenly you're asking this question, and people are smart because we're creatures of habit. So
they spot the change in behaviour.
Why have you suddenly changed doing what you're doing? Oh, they're looking to sell.
Yeah.
So you've sort of let the cat out of the bag yourself by just not being prepared. It's mad, isn't it? Yeah.
And then I think another one is who you work with through the transaction. So we were saying earlier, you have a choice. You can do it yourself. You can work with a broker. A broker is a specialist. But there's other specialists that you might need in your corner. You might need somebody to help you deregister from CQC. You'll definitely need a solicitor. And I'd strongly recommend using somebody who understands dentistry, particularly if there's an NHS contract in there, because you can really trip yourself up by getting that wrong. Your accountant should be somebody who you're talking to make sure that you're maximising any efficiencies within your accounts whilst you still own the business.
It may tax,
well, and it might be that speak to a specialist financial advisor. They may help you use some unused relief of owning a business that you can maximise during that period. So there's lots of pre-work you can do. But the point comes back to there's specialists out there that understand the nuances within dentistry. And if you don't use those people and you miss out, you're leaving money on the table. You know, we get a hard time from clients. Oh, I want a higher value. I want a higher value. But then they don't necessarily do all they could to minimise the tax or make them have the most efficient exit possible. True. That could be the difference. They go, oh, well, I really wish I could have got an extra 30 or 40 or £50,000. They could do that at the back end. If they were talking to their accountant and a financial advisor, they might be able to get that money at the back end, but they need to plan that in. So I think those trusted advisors is a really important part.
And I think someone said to us once, wasn't it? It's not so much about, especially the solicitors, knowing what should be in. It's knowing what isn't in.
Yes.
You know, because you can always challenge something that's in there that you don't agree with. But if you don't know it should be in there in the first place, you just don't know it's not in it. So you can't challenge it because you don't know it's there. So that's why it's so important to get an advisor to give you the benefit of their experience. Otherwise, you're sort of doing it on your own.
And I think the last part, and we've done a previous episode where we were talking about tips for people buying a dental practice. Obviously, this is for people selling. And I think we said back in one of those episodes about momentum and the importance of momentum of keeping a deal going. And this applies to the seller as much as to the buyer. You know, just because you've had an offer accepted on your practice does not mean it's sold. No. You're now going into a process of, you know, in a perfect world, it might be 4 or 5 months, but it could be 7 or 8 months. You need to stay motivated through that process. You need to keep momentum. You need to keep badgering your solicitor, the buyer. The broker will do a lot of this for you, but you need to supply information in a timely fashion because in our experience, deals tend to struggle. They just fizzle out. There's no momentum. If you can keep momentum in a deal, it just everybody stays engaged.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it, really? Because you do just have to keep pushing forward on it. I remember there was I love stories, and I don't know if you were involved in it, but it was a while ago, and we had a guy who, as Andy said, you know, the due diligence is something you need to do. You can't say, oh, I don't want to do it.
It's not for me.
The answer is not optional. You've got to do it. And he resisted doing it for about 6 months, I think, and it was painful. It was truly, truly painful. And then eventually he did it. The whole deal was going through, and then something happened. I think it was something to do with an associate or something. I think the associate left or something, and basically the purchaser got a bit nervous and then started to delay it. And the vendor said, well, you know, this is ridiculous. It's your fault. And I said to him, if you'd have done your due diligence when you should have done, you would have been out of this practice 4 months ago.
Situation wouldn't have occurred.
He didn't particularly like it, but he went, maybe you're right. Now, you don't want to be that person. No. You want to make sure that you've got everything, that you keep pushing, you keep that momentum going, so as you get to the conclusion. You know, you started. I think we started doing that, understanding, do you actually want to sell and why you want to sell? Yeah. And the answer is, you want to sell. That's what you want to achieve. You don't want to just like spend 9 months doing nothing, incurring cost, getting stressed, especially if you've done it yourself and all that lovely time you've got.
Oh, yeah.
You want a conclusion. Yeah. You want a completion.
And we appreciate, what we're talking about today is quite high level, it's quite generic. I think what we should do is if we put our contact details in the show notes, if people have specific questions, they can ask them because... Like I say, generic information is useful, but everybody wants to know the answers to their particular question. But hopefully that's useful for people to sell their practice.
And we don't charge, and it's free.
Absolutely right. Yeah. Absolutely. That was good.
Brilliant.
Enjoyed it. Thank you for listening to this episode of Dentology, where we discuss the business of dentistry. If you like what you heard, please do subscribe where you found this episode. That would be amazing. And also follow us on Instagram.